So, Blir de lönnsam min lille vän. It's a very famous artwork in the Stockholm Modern Art Museum. And there are a lot of kids in this artwork that are staring at you when you are the onlooker. And they're in full concentration, a bit like you are looking at me right now. But in that artwork, there's one little guy, and he's staring out of the window and he's dreaming. And for me, that little guy represents myself when I was a small child in school. I was always dreaming outside of the window. And my mother, who was a painter in life, in her early life, artistic painter, and became a very successful entrepreneur, she had read it really well, and she wrote on those reports to my teachers, this is what my son will be making his living with. And I think she was quite right. It turned out to be more or less like that. So I think what I want to talk to you today about is really about how you can discover creativity in people and how there's this invisible divide between the rational and the creative. And I noticed that when I went to the academy later on, I had studied economics before because of my dad. And I noticed that there was this similar look in the academy because I was an economic person. But I think both sides need each other. And I think some of the most successful companies in the world today are led by creatives or by, I think, tandems of people who are creative and economical combined. I think you cannot exclude one or the other. So this brings me to a professor I was following, McKinnon, and he made a connection between intelligence and creativity. And he found that it's completely unrelated. There's no relation between it. And it made me think of this Nobel Prize winner I heard on Swedish radio last year. Every year, Nobel Prize winners get their moment on the Swedish Radio 1, let's say. And he said that Nobel Prize winners very often are not the people who do well in class. They're not the best in mathematics. Sometimes they are, but very often they are not. They're usually very good at creative thinking. And this specific person was a physicist, I think. And he said even in an exact science, it's very often creative thinking that leads to a genius idea, which might be then proven by a very genius mathematician or a peer. So I thought that was interesting to hear. Talking about intelligence, we also live in a time of AI. I think that's interesting. I like to have AI do my laundry or my dishes, but not really my creative thinking. And I think it will take a long time for AI to really think creatively like a human being. So I think creative people will become ever more important in companies. And talking about AI, there's also something like the algorithm that pushes you in a certain circular thinking. And I notice with creative people that I work with that they very often come with designs. After that, they have been looking at Pinterest or Instagram. And I see these Instagram designs or Pinterest designs popping up this year on the Eurosong Festival, for instance. You had a lot of round designs. But I noticed in fashion and in other disciplines that I saw these similar round designs before. So I think this circular thinking happens a lot, and I very often advise them to stop watching Pinterest and maybe get a beer with their friends or do some long-distance running or go to a museum, but get impulses from somewhere else. McKinnon also said that there's no way to quantify creativity. It's another thing that I notice is large advertising agencies, which are often my clients. They tend to stack their prizes to quantify their creativity for, let's say, insecure business leaders who want to hire them, because they quantify how creative they are through those prizes. I think it's interesting how also in these big creative entities, which we need, their economical powers, and they're definitely necessary, it's important if you would hire them to see how they actually think. Do they have a creative environment, or when you're challenging them, how are they answering your questions, and do they do that immediately, or do they have to go back and do some meetings? You know, it's quite interesting to see if there's some impulsiveness and some childlike behavior, and that's another thing McKinnon states. Childlike behavior is really the instigator of creativity. So in my history, if you think, how have I been tested as a creative, I thought that was an interesting point to look back in my past. I had a very famous producer in Paris who called me one day, And he put me on the train, and he put me in Café de Flore, a very fancy restaurant where you may spot Karl Lagerfeld at the time when he was still alive. And we're talking about a lot of stuff, and he's all of a sudden really disappointed because it's raining outside. And he says, I wanted to go to the galleries. And I don't really understand what he means by it. And then he says, yeah, let's go to this bookstore around the corner. So we go to the bookstore around the corner, and we go through all these different topics, Francis Ford Fukuyama or Zaha Hadid, or, we go through every discipline that you can find in the store. And then he puts me back on the train, and I'm sitting on the train wondering, like, what the hell was that about? But then 3 months later, he lands my first international campaign for Nike, and then we did many more for Condé Nast and Vanity Fair and whatever. And years later, I come to think to that moment of what was he actually trying to tell me, or what was he doing in that library? So I asked him, like, what was the point of that? And he said, yeah, as a director, you need knowledge, but you mostly need to be able to connect different topics together and come with interesting connections and new ideas out of that. So I was actually just seeing whether you were a creative thinker or not. Very interesting. Another thing that I like to do in my life, apart from creating stuff, is building houses. It's my mindfulness projects. I build them myself. And one day I needed this petroleum roof, like a build-it-yourself roof. I'd never done it. And I live on an island in Sweden, so you can't find people to build it, so you have to learn how to build it yourself. And I go to this company, and instead of meeting these sturdy big builders who are gonna look at me like I'm an amateur, like I'm used to when I'm building, I find this very nice young lady, very colorful space. I get coffee, and we go in the back room, and there are different roof types. And she explains me how I can build my own roof specifically for my needs. So I walk out of that company, and I think to myself, this is quite genius. Like, I had expected something completely different. And I start to think, like, who has invented this system? I'm 100% sure that the person who invented this system was not a guy at Firestone or an engineer. I think it was a roofer sitting on a rainy roof with a lower back pain, probably eating his sandwiches and thinking, how can I make a creative way of, doing roofing differently, making money without having back pain. And definitely he must have found a peer at Firestone, an engineer or a finance person to help him in his business venture, which appeared to be a massive business venture. But still, I think, never look at the odd guy or girl when you're looking for creativity. And I think one advice I could give you is, if you are a company leader and you're looking at the guy listening to death metal with a music T-shirt cleaning the hallway, or you have a weird bookkeeper like me who likes Hawaiian shirts, maybe you should ask them if they have an opinion about your activity in your company. Because I think these people may just have a very different vision of what you're doing. Maybe they're thinking, why are these people in this company always doing it like this? I want to do it like that, but maybe nobody ever asked their opinion about it. So I think it'd be nice to conclude with a fellow, let's say, half a country hero of mine, Astrid Lindgren, who said, I've never done this before, so I'm probably quite good at it. I think it's the best quote in creative history ever made. And I think my mother was really right. I think the future in creativity is for childlike people who like to dream.